Watch right now on the Front News Project. Exclusive footage of the battles for Pokrovsk and Kupyansk. Putin proclaims occupation. The Ukrainian armed forces are eliminating the invaders. A powerful blow to Russian aviation. A unique A-60 aircraft with a combat laser has been destroyed, and this is just the beginning. NATO is preparing for war with Russia. The alliance's army is already at the Russian border. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch this right now. Greetings, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the most important news. Putin was informed about the alleged encirclement of 15 Ukrainian armed forces battalions in Kupyansk. Our Joint Forces Group provided an explanation. First of all, the city is small, so it's physically impossible to encircle 15 battalions there. Moreover, the video that the Russians are spreading gives them away. It's obvious that the footage is from the summer. So, right now, we'll show you how Russia not only exaggerates its successes at the front, but actually creates fake victories to please its Kremlin maniac. Let's watch.
Doberilia is near Pokrovsk. The National Guard Brigade Rubezh has currently stopped the occupiers' advance toward the city. All the details of the Trump administration's peace plan are unknown. However, the media are already discussing that one part of it could be the issue of Russian control over the network in Donetsk region, which the Russian army is so ruthlessly destroying. In other words, ours would have to withdraw from Donetsk region in exchange for other occupied territories. This hasn't been officially confirmed, but apparently this is supposed to be the key point of the plan. But honestly, today it's hard for me to imagine how, from this city that our guys are fighting for so desperately, they would leave without a fight. Russian war criminals are trying to do to Doberilia what they've already done to Toretsk or Bakhmut. They're leveling the city to the ground with bombs. Here's a fresh strike. The building is still burning. There are practically no intact high-rises left in Doberilia. But the occupiers keep shelling the ruins to prevent Ukrainian soldiers from gaining a foothold in the buildings if the Russians manage to break through here.
Some analysts, including Western ones, say that the front line in Ukraine has collapsed.
No, that's not true. But that's not true, because a breakthrough or collapse of the front line is when the enemy, with raiding actions and regular formations, can advance deep into our territory. That is out of the question. Even these attempts to storm with enemy column, several dozen pieces of equipment in the direction of Doberilia, have failed for them. The Doberilia direction is covered by the 4th National Guard Brigade Rubezh. One of the most motivated battalions is Power of Freedom. Highly motivated. But you see, unfortunately, our battalion is now very depleted, has suffered losses because we moved from the Siversk direction to Pokrovsk. The battalion was redeployed here at the moment when the enemy managed a breakthrough spanning several kilometers. Ukraine was at risk of losing control over Doberilia. The unit successfully completed the rescue mission. They had to advance, and the enemy's positions ended up behind the Ukrainian lines. Their clearing is coordinated from this command post, probably the closest one to the front line. Right now, the situation is more or less stabilized. There is a clear front line, and we have an understanding of where our forces are and where the enemy is located. But still, every day the enemy tries to somehow slip through our positions. They are looking for the spot where our defenses are the thinnest. They try to advance by sending in so-called meat groups. If they spot our movement somewhere along the route, they easily use 2 or 3 firing assets at the same time. They don't hesitate to send 10 to 15 fiber optic drones there. These 2 mortar guys captured entire enemy assault groups. These were 4 deep reconnaissance servicemen. They got confused, went the wrong way, and as they say, we happened to be nearby at the right moment and captured them together. Captured them.
We all took them prisoner together.
Here, one of the Russian prisoners surrendered voluntarily. We fed and re-educated him.
We fed and gave him something to drink.
Putin, who truly re-educated him in person, yes, he doesn't say, the esteemed president. These incredibly young guys, these very young guys my exact age, they are truly and deeply motivated. Their task was to come right into the settlement. We captured the first group. A few others, as I understand it, hid somewhere when they realized the group wasn't making contact. The Pokrovsko-Dobropolsk direction is the most difficult. The enemy has a numerical advantage of 5, sometimes even 10 times. The front line, as we see it on the map, practically doesn't exist here. The enemy infiltrates in small groups, and sometimes even artillerymen capture enemy soldiers. Strangely enough, in such a situation, classic artillery does not lose its relevance, especially these modern Dita artillery systems.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Alexandrovsk direction of the front. The enemy's army continues its military terror here as well. In the Alexandrovsk direction, Ukrainian units repelled 14 enemy attacks on our positions near the settlements of Ivanivka, Zeleny High, Alexeyevka, Privolne, and Krasnohorske. And now another extremely important topic. As a result of a drone attack on Taganrog on November 25th, 2 experimental Russian aircraft were destroyed. The A-60 equipped with a combat laser and the A-100LL, also known as the flying radar. In addition, the Taganrog South Air Base suffered serious damage, as did the plant itself, particularly the final assembly workshop. Besides the aircraft and the workshop, a position of the S-400 surface-to-air missile system was also hit. All the details are known. Our journalists have them.
Key military and energy facilities in Russia have come under attack. In just one strike, the Russians lost an aircraft repair plant, a drone manufacturing facility, an oil terminal, a refinery, an S-400 air defense system installation, and the cherry on top, the experimental A-60 laser aircraft, which Russia will no longer be able to recreate. Residents of Taganrog witnessed this glow. It was a very hot night there on Monday into Tuesday, especially in the area of the Beriev aircraft repair plant. The facility specializes in the development, serial production, modernization, and repair of amphibious aircraft and special-purpose aviation complexes, in particular the A-50 long-range airborne early warning and control aircraft. The aircraft plant also carries out major overhauls of Russian aviation aircraft and upgrades the Tu-95 MSM strategic missile-carrying bombers. Next to the facility is the plant's main testing base, the Taganrog Yuzhny military airfield. Rare units of Russian aviation equipment are stored at this location. More precisely, rare units of Russian aviation equipment used to be stored here. At the airbase, an A-60 aircraft, also known as the Flying Laboratory, was hit. This aircraft was intended for testing laser weapons. It is a Soviet development. The project was developed in the 1970s as part of the USSR's strategy to create anti-satellite laser weapons. The aircraft is distinguished by a distinctive hump. It is in this hump that a 1 megawatt laser installation is located. The idea was that this laser could either jam the optical devices of enemy satellites or even damage their sensors and other equipment. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the project was frozen, but the Russians resurrected it and spent years trying to bring it back to life. At the same time, they never forgot to threaten the world with their unparalleled weaponry.
The Russian army will soon be equipped with Star Wars-style weapons capable of burning the enemy both on the ground and in the air.
The Soviets developed only 2 such aircraft, so the destruction of one of them is not just a painful blow to Putin's ambitions, but a devastating one. The Russians will no longer be able to recreate their flying laboratory, and the Z Patriots know this as well.
Protective shelters, redeployment, never heard of such things. It will soon be 4 years since the start of the special military operation. The idiotic internet shutdowns didn't help either against enemy UAVs, which are controlled in part by satellite communication systems, or against local residents filming footage of the strikes. Probably, an effective measure would have been to relocate the aircraft from a region that is under enemy UAV attacks almost every day.
But the fact that these were drone strikes is by no means certain. The Ukrainian General Staff stated that they used Baz drones and Neptune cruise missiles to strike Russian strategic targets.
It's flying up to somewhere, way over there, high in the sky. Oh no, it actually hit the tall building. That was really quite a hell of a blast, damn. Wow.
During the strike on Taganrog, the Molnia UAV manufacturing facility by Land Aero was also hit. Fires have been reported at the site, according to the military. But it wasn't just Taganrog. Explosions were also heard en masse in the Krasnodar region. The strikes hit the Sheskari's oil terminal in Novorossiysk and the Tuapse oil refinery. In Novorossiysk, oil storage tanks and one of the S-400 air defense system launchers were damaged, according to the General Staff. The extent of the damage is being clarified.
And now about something truly terrifying. On the night of November 25th, Kiev was subjected to a massive attack using cruise and ballistic missiles as well as kamikaze drones. The enemy deliberately targeted ordinary apartment buildings with missiles and drones. According to the final data released after the completion of emergency rescue operations, 7 people were killed as a result of the attack. TSN journalist Alina Lisova visited the scene of the bloody events.
A hole in the wall of one of the apartments and walls blackened by flames. These are the consequences of the Russian night attack in the Dnipro district of the capital. An enemy drone flew into this 9-story residential building at around 2:30 in the morning.
The drone was buzzing. The drone was buzzing, that is the UAV. Then there was an explosion. The explosion was very loud.
The strike hit one of the apartments on the 7th floor, which caused a fire to break out there, and the flames spread to neighboring apartments.
My neighbor's apartment burned out. That's exactly the spot it hit her apartment. And my apartment is next door, but my windows face the front of the building. My neighbor, she lived in the village. She just arrived. Everything is fine there now. The only thing is maybe her dog died.
Due to the intense fire, people on the upper floors were trapped and shouted loudly for help. And some even desperately tried to get out on their own accord.
We lived on the 8th floor.
At the moment of the strike, we were at home. Just a hit, fire. We soaked a towel, covered the cat carrier, grabbed a towel ourselves, and managed to run out quickly.
There was fire on the 6th floor. Well, I don't even know how we made it through. It was just a nightmare. People, a woman was walking covered in blood. People, everyone was in whatever they had on.
We think we were born under a lucky star because if it had been a little more to the right, it would have hit us.
Firefighters arrived at the scene of the attack immediately. They put out the fire by morning. Rescuers also got to work right away. They've been clearing the rubble and building structures since last night.
The fire broke out from the 5th to the 8th floors. Partial destruction of the building's facade, as well as partial destruction of one of the inter-floor slabs in one of the rooms of the building. Unfortunately, during the firefighting operation, rescuers discovered the bodies of 2 deceased individuals. 17 people were rescued here, including 3 children.
The blast wave shattered many windows and balcony frames in neighboring apartment buildings.
It's horrible. We didn't go to the shelter with the child, we just sat in the hallway. It's just a nightmare. Only our windows were blown out. Now we're going to cover them up. All the services are working. I'm honestly surprised. Everyone is polite. We filled out everything quickly. Now we'll cover the windows, but that's just how it is now.
An emergency response center was set up in the courtyard to help those affected. In particular, anyone in need can receive psychological counseling, restore lost documents, apply for financial assistance, and warm up with hot drinks and food. And
now we move to the Lyman direction of the front. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. In the Lyman direction, since the beginning of the day, Russian invaders have attacked Ukrainian positions 43 times near the settlements of Orikhiv, Novovodyan, Novoyehorivka, Novoselivka, Kopanki, Kolodiazi, Sredne, Redkodab, Karpivka, Zarechne, and towards the settlements of Lyman and Drobyshev. Right now, Ukrainian defenders are repelling enemy attacks in 14 locations. But here's something else that's important. Muscovites and other residents of the Russian Federation should get ready. A new year without electricity is entirely possible. The Ukrainian armed forces are disabling the enemy's energy infrastructure in response to the barbaric attacks by the occupiers' army. The likelihood of prolonged blackouts in Russia is increasing every day at a geometric rate. Our next segment is about the outlook for the coming months for the Russian capital in particular, and for the entire Russian Federation as a whole.
The Ukrainian armed forces are significantly increasing both the number and effectiveness of strikes on Russian heating and power generation facilities. The actions of Ukraine's defense forces are a response to the ongoing attacks on Ukraine's civilian and critical infrastructure.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their air force. That's why it became necessary, and I'm not even mentioning the need to strike at enterprises of Russia's military-industrial complex and its energy system.
By trying to leave Ukrainians without electricity, the Russian dictator is condemning millions of Russians to a dark and cold winter.
If, for example, a blackout is threatened in the capital of Ukraine, the Kremlin must realize that a blackout will also come to the Russian capital.
This is Belgorod, so basically there's no electricity anywhere at all in Belgorod. Yes.
Since the beginning of November, Ukraine has carried out dozens of strikes on Russian electrical substations. Long-range drones are cutting off power in occupied Donetsk and Crimea.
Basically, charger phones, looks like they've decided to cut our power everywhere. I've already lost count after more than 30.
What? Kaluzhskaya 32, it's dark. And then it just kept going, darkness, darkness, darkness.
Cruise missiles and jet-powered drones are introducing millions of residents in the European part of Russia, including Moscow and the Moscow region, to the delights of blackouts. In addition to Ukrainian weapons, we shouldn't forget about the supply of Western arms, which Ukraine has also recently started using to strike Russian territory.
The necessary approval has been obtained. So we can say that the territories of the Rostov, Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk regions are now within the strike zone. Of Western strike systems, I want to emphasize again attacks with Scalp Storm Shadow. Only accordingly the modernized version of the S-200 surface-to-air missile system.
Before the onset of winter, Ukraine possesses a wide range of powerful long-range weaponry. Bark, Peklo, Polyanitsia, and FP-1 jet drones, as well as Flamingo and Long Neptune cruise missiles, can reach the largest Russian cities, including heating and power supply facilities in Moscow and Saint Petersburg.
Taking into account the climatic features of the Russian Federation and considering the tactical and technical characteristics of the Ukrainian side's strike capabilities, the Russian Federation is facing a harsh winter, both literally and figuratively. First and foremost, this concerns thermal power plants and other production facilities that sustain the life of major Russian cities.
Now, let's analyze in detail the operational situation on the Constantinovka sector of the front. The situation here is, as usual, extremely tense. In the Constantinovka direction, the Russians attacked the defense forces' positions 31 times. The main offensive efforts of the occupiers were concentrated in the areas of the settlements of Yablonevka, Pleshchevka, Ivanopolea, Rusinyar, and towards Konstantinovka and Sofievka. And it was also a terrible week for Ukrainian Zaporizhzhia. As a result of the Russian attack on the city, 31 apartment buildings, 20 private houses, businesses, a store, dormitories, and a gas station were damaged, and 19 people were injured. TSN correspondent Daria Nazarova, who herself lives near the site of the nighttime strike, visited the place the enemy targeted. Take a look at what Putin's Russia really looks like in all its glory.
In the courtyard, instead of cars, there's just scrap metal. 5 floors of the apartment building burned down completely. This is what the very center of Zaporizhzhia looks like this morning after yet another night attack. Starting at 10 p.m., Zaporizhzhia was shaken by enemy shelling of the regional center. The Russians carried out at least 11 strikes. Shahids targeted the apartment buildings. One of them detonated right next to the apartments of Zaporizhzhia residents.
You could see from the window. Everything was on fire. The balcony was burning. There was a loud crackling, and a car caught fire. Well, they were flying around and people were shooting at them. And my mom was sitting right here in this chair, and she said, I can hear it. It was just It was flying right into the room. She didn't even have time to get up before it exploded.
In the morning, the residents of Zaporizhzhia start cleaning up their apartments. Utility workers are on site. Katerina, a resident of the damaged building, says she heard the drone as it began its attack run. She was very scared for herself and her sister. She admits that in those moments, she was already saying goodbye to life.
The sound was getting closer and closer. We ran out at the same time, she from that room, me from this one. We met in the hallway. And then, well, the impact hit somewhere in the neighboring entrance. And only later, when we started gathering our things, did we see the real state of everything. Now we've come to at least try to put things in some kind of order.
The strikes on the city continued for an hour without stopping. Ekaterina says they saw a fire in the neighboring building and were afraid to go outside.
It was very scary because something was still flying. It's scary to go out into the entrance. We didn't even understand whether there was a fire in the entrance or not, because the windows of our apartment overlook the one that was burning. I'm looking for my sister, she's scared, and you tried to calm her down so that we can at least think straight somehow.
Inga is cleaning the apartment, taking out the broken glass, and recovering after a sleepless night. As a result of the strike, she says, the gas pipe was damaged in the neighboring apartments. A fire broke out. However, her apartment miraculously survived.
My son immediately started to panic. I have a first-degree disabled person. There was instant hysteria, panic. Well, we managed to calm down a little and went outside. The police told everyone to go outside because there was a risk of an explosion.
The woman says her family was simply lucky that everyone is alive and unharmed. The apartment itself was not badly damaged by the shockwave.
And here, of course, there's nothing. We've already cleaned up a bit. What's so scary? Out on the balcony, it was knee-deep. Well, mostly it's this side.
6 people who were injured are still in the hospital. 1 woman is in serious condition. After the attack, there have been power outages in the city. However, specialists promise to restore electricity by the end of the day.
And now it's time to analyze the current situation on the Hulyapol and Orikhiv fronts. Putin's army is up to its usual tricks here as well. On the Hulyapol front, our defenders stopped 17 enemy attempts to advance near the settlements of Zaporizhzhia, Solodke and Yablokove, Zeleny High, and towards Hulyapol. On the Orikhiv front, Ukrainian units repelled 2 enemy attacks on our positions near the settlement of Primorske. Meanwhile, Russia is waging yet another war in Europe. Europeans themselves are convinced of this, and they are preparing for an invasion by Putin's army like never before. NATO countries are concentrating weapons and manpower along the borders with Russia and Belarus. To prevent the well-known European bureaucracy from slowing down the movement of equipment, weapons and military units between countries, a so-called military Schengen is now being established. And Europeans are urgently restructuring their military-industrial complexes following Ukraine's example. Here are the details.
The threat from the Kremlin is getting closer. The European Union is preparing to confront Putin. NATO countries are concentrating weapons and manpower at the borders of Russia and Belarus. At the same time, European parliamentarians are seriously working on the military Schengen.
We must show Putin that Europe is no longer associated with impotence and democracy with weakness.
The Schengen is being prepared in close cooperation with the North Atlantic Alliance. Brussels is taking decisive steps. Among them is a plan to modernize the defense industrial complex. The European Commission has announced the timeline and presented a new package of military mobility measures. This will enable the European army to move quickly across EU territory without facing excessive bureaucracy, especially in the event of a potential threat from Russia.
We will be strong in the defense industry if we are industrially independent and if we are autonomous and much less fragmented.
Ukraine is acting as an ally. The country will gain access to defense logistics.
We want to expand military mobility corridors in Ukraine. This would serve as a security guarantee, meaning we could provide faster support if needed.
The first step is to modernize infrastructure, digitize procedures, and increase funding. One of the key challenges for EU countries remains ensuring the rapid transportation of troops to potential combat zones.
We can respond to these threats either symmetrically or asymmetrically. We have the full arsenal of tools at our disposal.
At the moment, the threat to the Baltics remains. And in the event of a sudden escalation, for example, the French army would need to cover about 1,500 kilometers to come to the aid of its allies. Although light units are able to move relatively quickly, heavy equipment requires significantly more time and preparation.
Currently, European bridges and railways are not suited for the rapid movement of tanks, soldiers, and military cargo. If transported from the west to the eastern flank, tanks could get stuck in tunnels, tangled in complex bureaucracy, and bridges might not withstand the passage of these vehicles.
Drawing on the experience of the Russian Federation's war with Ukraine, the European Union has devoted significant attention to modernizing critical infrastructure. Transport routes will be brought up to standard for dual use so that they can serve both civilian and military needs at the same time. The military Schengen plays a particularly important role in strengthening the defense of the Eastern Alliance, especially for the Baltic states and Poland.
Everything depends on our position. Will we be able to deter the enemy, or will we encourage them to act aggressively?
But not everyone sees the danger coming from Russia, or they simply try to turn a blind eye to reality by maintaining close ties with the Kremlin dictator Putin.
We're talking about an armament program that will require us to spend every last penny. And this concerns all of Europe. From the statements of several influential leaders, it is quite clear that they want to enter the war.
Germany is doing everything it can to help Ukraine, making every effort to equip the Ukrainian armed forces with long-range missile systems, as well as to organize joint production on our territory.
For several months now, we have been working intensively with the Ukrainian government on the implementation of long-range weapons projects. The Ukrainian army is being equipped with such systems. We have agreed not to discuss the details publicly, as we believe that the Russian side should not be informed about the extent of our military support. I can only say that we are doing everything possible to equip the Ukrainian army with weapon systems of the necessary range. And the number of such systems will increase in the coming weeks and months if necessary, up to and including the production of such weapons in Ukraine itself. Thank you.
The European Union's military budget is planned to be increased to more than 17 billion euros. In total, at least 100 billion euros are needed to modernize bridges and tunnels and to fully launch 4 corridors for military needs in the European Union. Putin's words cannot be trusted based on Ukraine's experience.
There's no need to make things up and form opinions about Russia based on these inventions. There's no need to create an image of Russia as the enemy. You made up that Russia wants to attack NATO. Are you completely out of your mind? You're as dumb as this table. Who came up with this? This is nonsense, you understand. Utter rubbish.
While the dictator is feeding journalists lies, members of the European Parliament are calling for regular joint exercises and loading tests. They want the European Union to follow NATO's example so that rapid reaction forces can respond swiftly to aggression. From the Kremlin.
That's all for today, but very soon there will be something new on the Front News program. Exclusive reports from our journalists in the hottest war zones, obtained so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.